There we go. Okay, we're live. We're going to let people come in. Good morning if you're joining us right now. I guess it's good afternoon in other parts of the country here. We've got a note in the chat box here to please let us know where you're calling in from, and then also let us know what kind of negotiation might be on the horizon for you, just as we kind of get people settled in. It'll give us a chance to learn a little bit about what you're looking to learn over the next hour. So hopefully y'all see the chat box. It should just pop up on your screen. If not, there's a bar at the bottom or the top of your screen where you can launch that box. Okay. All right, good. I see people rolling in. I'm gonna just pop the box up here again. Chat in here. Okay, there we go. So hi there, I'm Stacy Delo. I'm the CEO of Après, and I woke up super excited about this workshop in particular this morning. It's our first one on negotiation, which is something that I think most people feel like when they're going into a negotiation, they're preparing for battle, and yet it can really be a wonderful two-sided conversation. One of the things my mom always likes to say is that all value creation begins in the eye of the beholder. And I think that's a really great way to think about when you're entering a negotiation, what's at stake for the other person as well. It just kind of puts you in a different, perspective of looking at the way that you're communicating. So we have Sara Ironside with us today. She's a leadership and executive coach. She works a lot with corporations, so I'm really delighted to have her expertise here today, and we have a lot to get through in this hour. It will be an interactive hour, so we do hope that you'll let us know where you're chatting, where you are, and also what kind of negotiation might be on the horizon for you, just so we can get a little perspective of what you all want to get out of this hour. So please let us know in the chat box. You can also use the Q&A box to ask questions throughout. I'm going to moderate this and help Sara with letting people know when people have questions. If we do want to hear from you out loud, Sara will let us know it's a good time for someone to talk, and you can raise your hand. There's a raise your hand icon that you'll use also in that sort of bar there at the bottom of your screen. Otherwise, I'm going to hide my video, and I'm going to let Sara take it from here, and I will pop in and out as we want to hear from you all. Okay, great. Take it away, Sara, please.
Great. Thanks, Stacy. Thanks for your introduction and such great advice from your mom. Yeah. You're all to have moms who have great advice that we still
love those moms. Yes.
Hey, Stacy, when you look at the chat field, are you getting some good information on where people are from and what you see as being a negotiation on their horizon, or what's going on for them?
I'm waiting for people to let us know. We've got a group that's just continuing to roll in. So please, as we get going, please let us know your geography, and then also just where you are with maybe needing some negotiation help.
Perfect.
I'll keep you posted, Sara.
Thank you. That's helpful. And I just want to make sure that we are crafting this presentation to your needs so that you're getting what you want out of this conversation. So you can go ahead and listen and take notes if that's what feels comfortable for you. I do love it when it's interactive so that we hear your input and your story. It rounds out the conversation a little bit more. If the technology of Zoom is a bit confusing, totally understand. Chat in the chat field if you can, or take yourself, you raise your hand if you want to take yourself off mute and contribute to the conversation. Again, I think it's a much more robust conversation if so. So that in mind, let's make sure we get started so we wrap up within the hour. I'm working with some assumptions here that we have a challenge. There's a problem going on out here for women to really get what they want. And that is based on the fact, I believe, that women don't always know their self-worth. They don't know what contributions they can make and really what value they can contribute to society. And they don't always have the confidence to ask for what they want. There are a lot of things that go on our own minds that tell us stories and our inside voice that prevent us from putting ourselves out there and telling the world what contributions we can make and what we need in exchange. Sometimes we just don't know the protocol for how to actually negotiation. What's the process? What can I ask for and what can I expect? And this makes it really challenging for us. And so we don't know how to engage in these healthy and constructive discussions, because that at its essence is really what a negotiation is about. So with these challenges in mind, today's conversation is really going to be focused on ways that we can provide ideas for you to be able to have these happy and healthy negotiation conversations. So within the next hour, I really want to talk a little bit about a couple different things. One, what we see as being barriers to getting what we want. And these barriers, we know some of them are in our minds, some of them are stories and ideas we tell ourselves, and really how powerful those can be and how those get in our way. Also physical barriers, how we hold ourselves, and what sort of the message we're projecting as we're communicating. I also want to talk a little bit about what would be a process for negotiation. So when you're actually preparing for that discussion, what do you need to consider in advance? What do you need to pay attention to when you're in a negotiation? And how do you reflect so the process becomes much more natural to us? So hopefully through this whole conversation, we'll learn some best practices. You'll have some opportunity to take some notes and come away with a few nuggets relevant to what you are working on right now as a negotiation that you are heading into. And again, I think as Stacey and I said, please pause us anytime for questions, and I'll hopefully make sure to craft this as much as a relevant topic for you as I
So
can.
Sarah, I just want to type in, we do have some feedback, and I think it's really helpful. So we've got people kind of piping in from all over, and there's variation on the needs in terms of, we've got someone who says she's facing contract negotiations, VC negotiations, also interested in thinking about her own personal compensation negotiations, another on salary negotiations, and then another person who is maybe thinking about wanting the ability to work part-time. So, you know, a broad range, which I think is fabulous, because it's good to think about all the various ways that you can
Sure, absolutely. And that's great. So thank you for adding that in, Stacey, and knowing the topic of what you're negotiating about is important, and everything that goes around it, regardless of whether you're negotiating for a salary or for a change in a contract or different healthcare arrangements, or negotiating with your partner around how this new world is that you want to create for yourself will work. The way in which you negotiate might be very similar, but that's really good to know about the topic. So I'll make sure to address those as we talk. Okay, feel free to add anything in, again, in the chat field, especially if you have something different that you're working through. Just a quick nanosecond about me. So again, Sara Ironside. I'm a leadership development and organizational development consultant and coach. I work with large companies, small companies, all around the San Francisco Bay Area, which is where I'm based. And I too am a mom. I've got 2 boys, a cat and a dog, way too many males in my house as far as I'm considered. But I've gone through my own sets of negotiations in the work that I do in a personal life as well as professional life. So I believe I could probably relate to a lot of the challenges that you guys are up against. Okay, negotiation. So let's kind of start with, what are we talking about when we mean negotiation? How would you define that term? Feel free to type in the chat field. Feel free to raise your hand, take yourself off mute. I just want to see how you guys are describing the term negotiation. Stacey, feel free to chime in anything you're reading there as well, or if anyone wants to take themselves off.
Yeah, I think we should just keep going there.
Okay. All right. Why don't I get us started and then hear what you guys have to add as well in the interest of time. So negotiation can be described as a discussion aimed at reaching an agreement, or can also be described as a bargaining process, a give and take process between 2 or more parties, each with its own agenda, aims, needs, viewpoints, seeking common ground and to reach an agreement to settle a matter of mutual concern or resolve a conflict. So bargaining and negotiation can include conflict, but it might not. Basically, it could be about 2 parties trying to come together for a mutual need between the 2 of them. But it's also a method for settling differences. It has to do with compromise and avoiding argument and trying to find a way where people can get what they want out of it. Negotiation really should be about a win-win situation. And that's what we'll talk a little bit about in this scenario. Anything else to add, Stacey, from the chat field?
Just that this is a good one, that it's a compromise going back and forth to get what you want.
It can be a compromise, but to understand that compromise doesn't mean that it's an even compromise and I get 50% of what I want and you get 50% of what you want. But it's a way to achieve a mutually agreed upon outcome. So great to see that. So when we talk about all these different types of negotiations that come up in our world, what type of emotions come up for you? And again, feel free to chat these up or type these in the chat field. What I know that people feel when they go through negotiations is a lot of fear of how other people might perceive them. And this is a typical thing for women. They feel that they aren't necessarily worthy of throwing out a different idea, of challenging a different assumption, of coming up with a different recommendation. And so there's a lot of fear associated with that process. I know that a lot of women, when it comes to negotiating, they feel like they just don't have the skill to do it. They feel like it's a very skill-based activity. I would say that in the research about men versus women participating in a negotiation, is men don't have these mental barriers that women oftentimes do. Women have a lot of self-talk. They have a lot of voices in their head that make it challenging for themselves to get out there and say what they want. Men don't. They just put out there what they want, and they're sort of emotionally removed from the situation. Any other comments about emotions people feel as they're going through a negotiation?
Yeah, trepidation, concerns about giving up too much or not asking for enough. I have that one a lot where if somebody says yes so easily, I think, uh-oh, I didn't ask for enough.
Right, right. And mostly that's just about our self-talk, right? It's about describing who we are and what we think we're worth. And if they say yes, then we're not worth, we didn't put our worth out there high enough. And if they say no, then we don't have enough worth. There's a lot of mental games that go in the process for women. So that's oftentimes what makes it difficult for women to negotiate. We have a hard time with some of these components. So let's talk a little bit about some of these challenges we have from both a mental and physical component around entering into negotiations, regardless of what you're negotiating for. So the mental barrier. This is the amygdala hijack, that kind of situation that happens sometimes when someone comes to us and says, what do you mean you want more money for this position? What do you mean you want me to take care of your kids for a longer part of the day? What do you mean by it? So we oftentimes, when we're confronted by a challenge, we have a flood of emotions that come through our body. And this is because of a component of our body, our brain. It's called the amygdala. It's a small little almond-shaped structure at the base of your limbic system. And it calls for a trigger response, either a fight or a flight response in our brain. And so that floods your body with chemicals and hormones and causes a lot of unconscious reactions that we don't necessarily want to happen. Sometimes we get sweaty palms, sometimes our face gets red, sometimes we stammer or speak quickly, oftentimes our mind goes blank on what we need to say. And so to note that this is oftentimes a response that happens, especially if we're fearful of a negotiation that we're heading into. And because the amygdala is oftentimes triggered by memory, sometimes if a situation has gone poor for us in the past, maybe we've tried to negotiate for a salary in the past and it didn't go so well, that's a very strong, powerful memory that stands out for us and tells us, hey, if it happened this way in the past, it's going to happen this way for us in the future. And so for the opportunity for us is to prevent this flood of emotions that might overtake our body and prevent us from thinking rationally from happening. So as we're going through the rest of this conversation, I have some advice to give, and please add notes in the chat field because we've all gone through these situations in the past. Oftentimes our amygdala, especially women, is triggered around situations that have to do with our status or our rank or our privilege or how we believe we are seen by other people in the world. So to prevent this amygdala hijack, there's a lot of mental preparation you need to go through to get yourself prepared. Some of these are kind of self-soothing tactics before you go into a negotiation. Do a lot of deep breathing, calm yourself, tell yourself you're worthy of that raise. Tell yourself you have the capability to go in and negotiate the contract and find creative solutions. Tell yourself you're going to be able to come up with a solution that's going to be mutually beneficial. All of this positive reinforcement is really what people need to tell themselves that they are actually capable. So if you think that you're going to be someone who's going to have that emotional, mental barrier to being successful, note that about yourself, first of all, and think of how you can calm yourself and give yourself the positive self-talk to tell yourself you can work through it. Some tactical things you can do are to practice your negotiation in advance. Think about words you're going to say. Practice in front of someone who is going to be a really good audience, not the person who's always going to say, that was a great job, Sarah, but someone who might give the hard questions, who might have the grumpy face, someone who might do things that kind of trigger your amygdala hijack. So practice, keep calm, positive self-talk are ways that you can prevent that mental flood of emotions from occurring. Another mental barrier that comes up in negotiations sometimes, and this is typical of women, is we get very overwhelmed by all of the feelings associated with a situation. So men oftentimes, and this is a strength typically of men oftentimes look at decisions they need to make, situations they're in, which basically a negotiation we've talked about is really about a partnership in making good decisions. Men are very good about emotionally removing themselves from the situation. So they're standing outside of it. If you look at the graphic on the left, they're seeing a situation, an option, a set of opportunities for them from a distance. They say, okay, I'm negotiating a salary. What's the cost? What's the price? What do I have to give? What might they have to give? What am I worth? And that whole discussion almost is a separate conversation from themselves. They look at it from a very objective perspective. Women, on the other hand, that kind of graphic on the right, they oftentimes get into the situation. They consider all of the aspects of the conversation as something that's hitting them personally and as a reflection of their values and a reflection of what they stand for and a reflection of all these things that represent them as a person. And this is sometimes a wonderful reason why we're women, right? We are empathetic, caring, warm, nurturing, tactful people. And so someone's making a decision, it's something that we get really emotionally invested. We are standing in that decision. And that can be very hard for us sometimes to distance ourselves emotionally. That can prevent a mental barrier for us. So if we were to take the scenario of, let's say you were trying to negotiate a childcare arrangement, right? You were trying to find an opportunity for your child to be taken care of one day more a week because you're taking a job opportunity or different work or for whatever reason. And so you're having to make this decision about childcare. If you're thinking with your feeling, if you're coming into a negotiation instead of decisions thinking with feeling, you might be flooded by all of those emotions that have to come with that parenting responsibility and how you're going to support your child and what might your child think about you if they're going to spend one more day at childcare, and be flooded by all the emotions because you are right there in the center of it, as opposed to distancing yourself from the situation and thinking about childcare from a very objective situation. So the guidance here is to really, when you're trying to come up with decisions, as much as possible, remove the emotional component. Try to think of it from a very objective standpoint so you can look at the situation from a different perspective. Men are very good at this. It comes more naturally to them. This is a generality, but there's a lot of data to support this. For women, it's something that we have to pay attention to. So if you're catching yourself heading into a negotiation, again, flooded with those emotions, notice if you're standing in the center of it or if you have the opportunity to stand back and look at it objectively. I'm going to show you a couple more things and then we'll pause for any questions you guys have. Okay, another barrier that we can have to being successful in negotiation is our body language. I don't know if anyone's heard of Amy Cuddy. She's from Harvard. She did a lot of research with a partner at Cal around body language. And her question was really to kind of find out, do bodies shape our thinking and does our thinking shape our bodies? And what she found from her research was, in fact, yes. And what she's known for, and I'll give you the resource to learn a little bit more about her after this, what she's known for is the research she did around body language, especially around powerful poses. She wanted to know if how we hold ourselves physically influences how other people see us, and also if it influences how we see ourselves. So this is really, really important when you're trying to negotiate with someone else, how you show up physically. The research shows that if you're in what she calls low power poses, those pictures on the left, that you come across as someone who's private, someone who is shy, someone who does not think positively about themselves, isn't capable, not willing to take risks. And these are all of these folding in positions, right? The arms crossed, the looking down, the shoulders hunched. And so catch yourself right now. I challenge you right now as you're listening to this conversation. How are you sitting? Are your ankles crossed? Are you kind of hunched over? Is this conversation feeling kind of overwhelming for you? If so, think about how your body language might express that to someone else. So if you are in a meeting with someone, if you're negotiating, how are you holding yourself? Are you holding yourself in a high power pose? So the poses that are there on the right-hand side. And that's not to advocate that you necessarily go into a negotiation with your feet up on the table or throwing your arms back or looking really casual. But those type of body movements describe a different level of confidence. They show that we can be assertive, that we're optimistic, we can think abstractively, we're creative, that we feel really confident in ourselves. And so notice, just even as you enter into a conversation and how you sit in a chair across for someone, what kind of message that's giving. Are your shoulders back? Are you sitting in what we call the square position, which is your shoulders are aligned with your hips. You're not slouching. You're not moving side to side. Your feet are square on the ground. Maybe you're leaning slightly forward in your chair in the square position. That is a physical way to say, I'm competent. I'm capable. I have a lot to offer in this conversation. So think about how your body language projects the powerful person you want to be in a negotiation, and how you can enter into that conversation that way. We also know that body language not only says a message to others about who we are, but it also sends a message to ourselves about who we are. So as you're preparing for a negotiation, get yourself in this physical mindset. Get yourself to be in a powerful pose. So whether you're channeling your inner Usain Bolt or Mick Jagger or Oprah Winfrey or Wonder Woman, get yourself pumped up for a conversation. And what this is this, just putting your arms up and arms back and just moving around, get the circulation through your body, get you thinking open, get you confident in where you're heading. So it might be before you're meeting with someone and to go in for that negotiation, instead of like being hunched over and looking at your iPhone or taking your notes, instead take 2 minutes to go to the bathroom and do a Wonder Woman power pose. Open yourself up to get that positive energy through you. And research shows this actually helps. So the physical movements of doing this, so I'm giggling thinking of all of you could have out in the bathrooms, doing your Wonder Woman power poses, but actually that does help. So the physical movements help as well as the mental movements. So pulling these two things together, the mental and the physical parts together, the mental part is a lot about the self-talk you can do. The physical part is about actually physically doing it. And a great way to pull these two together is through visualization. There has been a ton of research that shows if you close your eyes and mentally walk yourself through a negotiation, a conversation, one where there might be conflict, difference of opinions, challenging of ideas, and think about how you're going to be successful, you can be successful. So before you head into that difficult meeting, and this is usually within an hour of your actually doing it. You can practice it the night before or days in advance, but usually within an hour, do a mental walkthrough. Think of how you're going to be sitting in that meeting. Think about where the other person's going to be sitting. Think about what's going to be in front of you. Are you going to have your notes? Are you going to have no electronics? How are you going to be sitting in that chair? How are you going to make eye contact? How are you going to work through that whole process? And visualize everything. What might that person be doing? If they have that scrunchy look on their face, how are you going to respond? If they're slouched back, if they're talking to someone else, if they're distracted by their technology, how are you going to respond? So visualize the entire process. What are you going to have to drink? What happens if there's a phone call that happens? Everything that might happen in that conversation, walk yourself through it. And think about how your body is going to support you through that conversation and what type of mental self-talk you can do to be very objective and not be flooded by emotions will really help you in that conversation. And one last thing before we take a quick pause is around how to get those words out of your mouth in the right succinct way. Because research has shown that how you show up, that visual communication, matters so much. And a lot of this I pulled from research from Barbara Tenenbaum, who is a professor at Brown University, and she does a lot of research on what she calls dynamic communication. You could look for her in a YouTube video. But I went to one of her presentations, and she has great research, especially around how women are actually very good at making first impressions. And this is such a powerful thing to be able to do. That strong handshake, that looking in the eyes, that understanding what the cultural norms are in our work environment. Are people very casual in how are they talking? Are they very formal? We're really good at emulating that and really supporting people in doing that. And so her advice really in having a strong communication is, again, projecting yourself in a visual way, thinking about your posture, and really understanding your audience. WIFM, if you're not familiar with that term, the WIIFM, the what's in it for me, getting to know your audience when you communicate. How are they expecting you to communicate with them in a really impactful way? And how can you manage your message around that? So those are some thoughts and ideas around showing up to a presentation with both kind of your mind and your body prepared. What questions or additional comments do you have around that part of our discussion?
I love the idea of the physical, just sort of physically doing something to get yourself in the mode, to feel good as well, as mentally prepared. One of the things that I try to do before negotiations is do something that I like to do for a few minutes. So maybe it's going for a quick run, or listening to a podcast that makes me think about something totally different, but gets my, brain really functioning. Those are just a couple of my personal strategies, I guess.
Those are great. And I'm so glad you put that in there, Stacey, because those research shows the 10 minutes prior to a negotiation should be really focused on getting yourself present. So I love the exercise suggestion, and a podcast or something that's a different topic are actually what you need. Looking at your notes for the 400th time, that very last minute before you walk into it, research shows isn't usually what you need. You need those deep breaths. You need that power pose. You need some self-talk to get yourself in the gauge. You need the walk around the block. That's what's going to get you present, because that accesses all of the information and prep work that you've done in advance. Great suggestions. Anything else coming in on the chat field, or anyone else want to contribute, Stacey?
Yeah, this is a great one. My partner who's in sales says to put $100 bill where he can see it, which is a great suggestion too.
That's awesome. I take that as being the reward for your going through the negotiation, or what's on the other end.
Yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Yes, once I get through this conversation, I get to go. I get to have, absolutely, that's your motivation, right? Yeah. That's really what fires us up. Anything else we're seeing, or any other comments that want to come in?
I think that's it for now, but these are great. So if you have any more, please put them in the chat box. Please
do. I'm only one person with some ideas, and you've all been through this before. So negotiations. So that's the mental and the physical component, which I didn't want to dismiss that, because that's so important to really getting yourself in the right stage. My sense is people also want some tactics around how do you negotiate, which has to do with preparation beforehand. What do you get in store, and what's the right process to go through this? And believe it or not, we actually as women have some great tactics to do this. So let's shift gears a little bit and think a little bit about what the process is for going through a negotiation. So before you enter a negotiation, there are some things that you can do. And this was based a little bit on some research I looked into by Margaret Neal. She is a professor at Stanford, and she does a lot around decision-making research from the cognitive psychology perspective. She has a couple questions that she suggests you think through. First being, why are you asking what you're asking? So the person who had chatted in around a salary negotiation. What are you really asking for more money for? And really to get to the root of that, is it that you want more money just so that you have a little bit higher of an income for for your family? Or is there something that really you want to get to that isn't at the surface of your mind? Are you negotiating for a higher salary when really what you want is some type of validation that you are making a contribution in the job, and you want to feel valued, and you want there to be some type of reward that describes the contribution you're making? And if that's the case, that's what you need to negotiate for. That's what you need to ask for, is something that demonstrates your competence and your contribution. And salary, no matter what kind of salary you get, isn't necessarily going to be that. So pay attention to why you're asking what you're asking for. Okay, second one is, how are you asking? So research shows that women are oftentimes uncomfortable asking for a specific personal outcome. I want this for me. We feel very vulnerable. We feel that we're going to be judged for some reasons that you guys had commented earlier, that we're not worth what we're asking for, or maybe we're worth more. We feel that if we ask for something for ourselves, that we're being selfish. We have a lot of stories about what this means. But what we are good about negotiating for is something if there is a mutual benefit for the counterpart. So we don't ask for ourselves, we ask for something that's going to support both of our needs. In this way, we're very talented negotiators, right? So we negotiate with our family all the time. Okay, if you eat your broccoli, then you get 10 minutes more of screen time. Okay, I get vitamins in your body, you get what ultimately you want, which is some extra screen time. So we are really good about this, and we feel very confident and competent in doing this if we know that the solution is going to support us both. So I challenge you and advise you in every negotiation you head into to come with the belief that the other person wants a positive outcome too, that they want you to work for that company, that they want you to take that job, that they are willing to be flexible in how the arrangement works out, that they want to give you that contract, that they want your child to come to their daycare service, and that they are coming to the conversation wanting a positive solution too. So if you start with that belief, we both want something out of this, we both want the positive outcome, then women are very successful about coming to a conversation thinking, how can you help me get what we both want out of this situation? And we are actually very talented at doing this. So consider how you're asking and find ways for it to be mutually beneficial. We'll talk more about this more in a few minutes. And for whom are you asking? Again, research shows that women are very good at what we call this communal problem solving. How do we both get something out of this situation? Men are very good at negotiating for themselves. Women, they really, again, want to think about how the outcome is going to support a lot of people other than just themselves. So if you're negotiating for that higher salary, how can you say, actually, this isn't just so that I have more money to spend shopping or traveling or doing my leisure activities, but it's so that I can feed my family. It's so that I can invest in my future. It's so that I can live with some safety and comfort in my life. And when we think about who we're asking for the people around us who depend on us. We're thinking about the future that we know that we need to plan for ourselves. We feel much more comfortable asking what we're asking for. So it's not that you come into negotiation saying, hey, I need a higher salary because I've got to send these kids to college and I've got to pay this mortgage and my parents are getting a little bit older. We're not coming in with that language in the negotiation, but we're coming in with our own mindset. Think of it for yourself. It is on you. It is your responsibility to get that higher salary in this scenario because these people depend on you. And if we think about it that way, who are we asking for? Oftentimes we feel much more comfortable asking for it. So widen the net of who you're asking for, who you're asking on behalf of in your negotiation. Okay. Actually, before I skip onto this, let me pause. Are there any questions about that? Because that has to do with sort of a new mindset around entering a negotiation. Questions or reactions to sort of this mental preparation? Or Stacey, anything else to contribute on this?
I do have a question, but I'm not sure if you want to take it right now. It's a good one.
Sure.
And maybe it is to think about before you enter. It's the idea of preparing to walk away. Rather than to, she says, rather than to accept less, does having a minimum base give you more confidence in the process of the negotiation?
Great point. Great point. And we'll get into that absolutely, because you're right, that compromise, that choice to leave is absolutely one that's on the table, and it's one that definitely needs to be considered. Absolutely. Yeah.
Great.
Any other comments or reactions to some of this kind of pre-think, if you will, before negotiating?
If anybody wants to ask a question out loud, just raise your hand and we can come to you. I can watch for that.
Okay. Well, raise your hand, please. Otherwise, let's go on to some actual steps, and we'll address that one around, the price to pay. So to think about the steps to go through when you are entering into negotiation, Margaret recommends 4 different steps. The first one is assess. So you want to be able to assess what's going on in the situation before you actually dive into it. So, and this is sort of the outweighing the cost kind of question that came in as well. Do the benefits of engaging in this negotiation outweigh the costs? So let's say your negotiation is around negotiating for a flexible work schedule. You want to ideally have 2 days a week that you are working from home or in a job interview, and it's a full-time job, and you want to be able to work from home twice a week. So is it worth it for you to head into this conversation to begin with? Maybe you know from the get-go that this person only really wants you to be in the office 5 days a week. And you're even mentioning it compromises the fact that you might not be seen as a viable candidate. You really, really, really want this job. And in truth, maybe you're okay working in the office 5 days a week, at least for now, and potentially negotiating down the road. So think about, is it even worth it? Secondly, in what ways do you have influence in this situation? So if we again start with the belief that this person wants to hire you for this job, they want you to work there, they want an outcome that's going to work. What type of influence do you have in this situation? Where do you think that you might be able to have some perspective that this person doesn't have? So maybe you know that other people do have flexible work arrangements in this company. Or maybe you know that actually you have a skill set that's really, really unique that they really want to have you in to be able to use in the organization. Be able to lean on those and leverage this additional information to be able to influence the situation. And here, this last one is the one that kind of came in on the chat field. What is the price you're willing to pay to avoid negotiating? Meaning, if I don't negotiate, am I willing to give up those 2 days of working from home? And maybe that's okay, and maybe it's not. So think about what it's worth to even enter into the negotiation to begin with. How important is all of this to you? Okay. Second step, prepare. So this is some of the work that you should do on your own in advance of actually having this kind of conversation. So think about, what are your interests in the negotiation? Well, listen, working from home 2 days a week really benefits my family, and the flexibility and the lot commuting and being home for my kids, what have you. What are the interests in your counterpart? Is it a work environment where everyone needs to be present? Do you need to be available to dial into calls real easily? Is it something that you need to have a lot of face-to-face interaction with clients and your colleagues? What's important to them? As much as you can spend time sitting in their shoes, it will absolutely benefit you in the conversation, because you want to enter into conversation saying, I know what's important to you. I know what you're thinking. I know what you're looking for. And I have some ideas around how you can get what you want to get. So you need to gather all this information in advance and think about what might be an alternative if you don't get a good deal. A good deal would be you're telecommuting 2 days a week. But what other options are available? Maybe it's only working from home 1 day a week. Maybe coming in a little bit later and staying a little bit later would be a viable option. What other kinds of things can kind of come up that would help you get a little bit of what you need that supports what's important to them? And what's what we call the reservation price? Where are you indifferent to a yes or no? Meaning they might say, well, you can only telecommute, but it has to be on Fridays. Which you might say, well, I was kind of thinking maybe a Tuesday would be more convenient for me, but sure, I'll take a Friday. So think about those things that you're indifferent to, because that will show that you are willing to be flexible in the compromise. And what's your aspiration? What's the most optimistic assessment of what you can achieve from the assessment, from the situation? That 2 days a week, that might be really optimistic, but think about what's really possible when you're thinking about your aspirations, because that's what you want to go in with. Stacey, you had kind of said something earlier around, when someone came back to you with a yes around you were negotiating. I think it was a salary piece, and they said yes, and you were wondering, maybe I should have had a little bit higher. Start with what you want. Start with asking for what you want, because believe it or not, you might get it. Especially if you're coming in with a really good case and you've assessed them well, it's worth fighting for. You really have an idea that's going to be in their best interest as well. You have some influence in the situation because you have something to contribute. Ask for what you want, and then be able to adjust as needed. Okay, let me show you the other steps, and then we'll pause. But again, add in any questions or comments as we're going through this. And then get ready for your ask. And as we've talked about, women are really good about doing this in conversation with someone. Don't think of it as a combated across the table. The physical conversation might be around the table, but if you're sitting there in a really good power pose, really confident, leaning forward, it is a mutual discussion. How are you sharing what's important to you and learning from them what's important to them? And really coming to a conversation saying, how can we work on this together? Here's my challenge, and here are some ideas around how to solve my challenge. How can you help me make this work? Doesn't that just feel nice, right? It's almost like you're in a conversation with your friend. You say, I would love to work for your company. I feel from our interviews, you realize I have a lot to contribute. Here are my key skill sets, and from what I know about the job, I really think I can make a difference here. Help me say yes to this job offer. And what I need to say yes to this job offer is some flexibility to work from home. Here are the reasons why that really needs to occur. And this is where I could be, and before you even kind of get into the flexible parts, you ask for what you want, that aspirational intention. How can we make this work that you get the employee you want, right? You've given me a job offer, and I get what I need, 2 days to work from home. So really entering into conversation, believing that they want the best outcome too, and asking for it will potentially yield you much better benefits. It's an information idea sharing discussion when you enter into the ask. And one tactic that she had mentioned, which is a really good one, is a package. To put together all your solutions in one idea and think about the challenge from a big picture perspective. Don't come in with specific little one-liner suggestions. Well, if I telecommute on these days, then this is what will look like. Package it all together. If you get me as an employee, you will get all these amazing contributions I can make. And if I telecommute 2 days, there'll be some great benefits. And really use that if-then statement scenario as your tool in your ask. So if I telecommute on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I can join those staff meetings, which I know you want to have really early on those days. If I don't telecommute on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I might miss those because of some of my home responsibilities. If I come in a little bit later on Thursdays, and work a little bit later on Thursdays, then that would be great, because then I'll have some opportunity to meet with some of the clients at the end of the day who work in a different time zone. So use some if-then statements to kind of draw out a scenario that you think will benefit you both. And before we kind of get into the reflection point right here, tell me what you think about some of these suggestions. And what might be some scenarios where you can see yourself using some of these? I'd really like to kind of pause here and use this as a discussion opportunity. So again, raise your hand to contribute, ask your questions, or lob some statements into the chat field. I can wait. Stacey, from your negotiations that you've had in the past, where have you found some benefits in using these tactics or others?
Yeah, I find that that thinking about, again, sort of what they would like out of the negotiation is actually really helpful, because then it allows me to put a parameter around what I'm willing to give up. So I try to put thought into that. And then I really sit down and spend time thinking about what are the things that I want to get across. And I usually, I mean, I have like my own sort of personal 5-bullet strategy, but 5-bullet point strategy that I think, could be edited depending on what your personal approach is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So tell me more about your 5-bullet strategy. I'm curious about that. Is that a good one to share? I don't mean to put you on the spot.
Sure. No, so I typically open with almost like a statement of gratitude, and for the opportunity to be in the situation, and sort of a big picture thought about the opportunity, and then it sort of ends with what I'm going to ask for. And then I use the next 3 points to really solidify the ask of, this is, almost the justification for the ask, I suppose, if you will. And then I summarize at the end. Again, kind of going back to the statement of gratitude about the opportunity, and the ability to do big things together. I'm just sort of talking out loud here.
Yeah.
And what's possible, and then that I appreciate them listeing to those points. And I don't know if that's the right strategy or not, but that's kind of how
that's a great one. I think it's a great one, and it's a great one, especially to bookend your proposal. It sounds like a bit around the bit of gratitude, and also one that you've thought through an opportunity. You've thought through the options, and you have some suggestions, and you have some asks out of it. Absolutely. Are you getting any comments in the chat field, or questions, or hands raised? Such a quiet group today.
Yeah, if anyone wants to talk out loud, definitely raise your hand. It's that icon at the bottom of your screen. Not seeing any at the moment.
All right. Well, as we are just kind of looking in reflection, and then I will take any questions, especially around specific situations that you're in, to really, after you've gone through a negotiation, and it might even be something small as a negotiation that you go through with your family member in the next few weeks. If you're planning for a big negotiation at some point, catch yourself doing negotiations you do on a regular basis. So when you're jockeying with things for your kids or your partner or your family members, think about how you can go through this process in preparation. So if you're coming to your partner and saying, ooh, I want a night out with the girls, and I'm not too sure how he'll feel about it for whatever reasons, mentally get yourself and physically get yourself ready for a conversation. Practice doing this. Tell yourself that you're worth it. Tell yourself why it's of value. Think about how you're going to project your needs in a physical way. Do a practice around that way, and go through the preparation. I will show you a list of resources that kind of direct you to some of these steps that we've gone through. Think about what your ask is. Think about how it's going to be mutually beneficial. Think about what your aspirations are going to be, what your top ask is, and what you're willing to negotiate, to be flexible for, and how to really go through those steps. And when you go through a negotiation, reflect. Pause to think about, how'd that go for you? Did you have sweaty pits the whole time, and you were so nervous, and you kept having this like inside voice that was challenging you and telling you weren't worth it the whole time? All right, let's think about doing some mental work to support quieting that voice. Or did you feel like you hadn't prepared, and you didn't really know what the client really wanted? You didn't really know what the position was from their perspective, and how might you have been able to do research a little bit differently? One thing, let me pause on this, because I think people get a little bit overwhelmed with the part around, how do I understand what's in the best interest of the client if I only have talked with them a couple times, right? Around the question around the contract negotiation too. You don't always know what their perspective is and what's important to them. I think sometimes we think we have to come into a negotiation having known all this, right? Like somewhere it exists on the internet, or somehow we're going to find someone through LinkedIn who knows that person who can give us that whole story. And sometimes we can find that information through that kind of research, but oftentimes we can't. There is no rule that says when you enter into a negotiation, it has to be a presentation and a didactic way of communicating. You can ask some questions. You can say, I assume from our previous conversation, this and this and this is important for you. Am I catching that right? Or when we were talking about this, I made the assumption that the skill set I'm bringing is really, really critical to your business for these reasons. Help me understand why that's important to you a little bit more. You can enter into a negotiation conversation still trying to understand the world for their perspective. And it's great fodder because then when you're coming back for the ask, you can say, oh, that's great information that you told me more about your business need. That's going to work so much better now if I have to be in for early morning meetings on Tuesdays and Thursday, which is really tricky for me. If I can call in for those meetings and I can telecommute, that's going to support us much better. So just as a side note around that preparation piece, there's only so much you can really do in advance, but feel free to use that conversation again as a way to share information. So in reflection, make sure that you take time to go through these steps and think about what worked or didn't work well for you as well. Okay, I didn't mean to throw in other bits of advice there. I wanted to make sure that we had ample time for any questions, especially any specific situations that you're heading into right now, or that are on your horizon, or that you know to be especially tricky for you. Let's please use this time.
Definitely. If you have any specific situations that you want to get a little one-on-one coaching on, I definitely pipe in. Now, we've got a couple things coming in the chat, and one of them is from Michelle, where she says, it's important to remember that the answer to an unasked question is always no, which is interesting. We have a section in our book that's coming out in October that talks exactly about that nobody knows you want these things unless you ask. So
great point, Michelle.
That somebody can say is no for sure, but you can always work with a no. You can always find some way to work with a no.
Yeah, and if you don't know, you don't ask, right? Exactly. You just don't know. It should be that you enter a negotiation saying everything that's important to you and learning from them what's important to them. If you don't know, if you don't ask, you're right to know.
Yeah, and my kids never listen to me saying no. They have a way of getting around my no. So
that's a different no. That's a different no. Fair enough.
Use that as a strategy for thinking about that. And then Fran's asking if you have some pointers for working with those open-ended questions with single word answers. Maybe Fran, you might want to elaborate a little bit on that.
So sorry, I'm not understanding. What open-ended questions with single answers?
Yeah, Fran.
Maybe Fran, if you wouldn't mind taking your cell phone
in more or call in, that's fine. And then we've got one person saying they requested support to attend a conference and thinks that the boss is inclined to say no, but HR is supportive. Any tips when you get a mixed response? Great question.
Great question. So if we come with the belief, and this is our choice to believe this, that everyone wants a mutually beneficial outcome. And so if your boss is saying no, he or she's coming for some reasons. If HR is saying yes, they're coming for their own reasons, and you're coming for your own reasons. So what's missing is a lack of information amongst you all. And if we go in with the belief that everyone wants the right outcome, then part of it's going to be sharing information. So the best you can do to kind of understand the rationale of what the barriers are for your boss, is it a cost thing? Is it a time away from the office thing? There might be something going on for them personally, an ego thing, right? If she goes to the conference, I'm not at the conference, that might be perceived as something negative, whatever, something going on for them. Get to the root of really what the barrier is and what a different opportunity might be. So oftentimes when there's a difference of opinion is really just exposing what information is missing. So what HR's perspective might be that the boss might not have a perspective about that needs to be shared. So try to use it as an opportunity for information sharing as a way to influence the outcome you might want. Great question.
Yeah, it is a great question.
Other questions or explanation from Fran around what she meant by those questions?
Yeah, Fran, are you still there? Do you want to? Oh, we've got one who wants to talk live. Let's go.
Great.
Go there. But Fran, chat in if you want to explain that one a little bit more. Okay, here, Aram, I'm coming to you. You may need to also unmute yourself. There we go.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can. Hi, Aram.
Great. Hi, thank you so much. And so I was the one who asked about the conference.
Good.
Okay. I guess my concern is if the final answer is no, is it fair to ask for the why from my boss? Because I'll know who said no, but I won't necessarily know why. And I'm wondering if it's fair to ask for the rationale after the fact.
Let me ask, is there some reason why you're concerned about asking a why? Why wouldn't you ask a why?
Uh, this person doesn't necessarily like to be challenged in general. I suspect he might say no because he thinks, the skills or the content of the conference, because it's a skill building conference, would have served me better earlier on in my position, and he thinks it's too little, too late. That's my speculation.
Sure. Well, and that's a good scenario, because oftentimes we come with some assumptions, and that might be true as to why he said no. But your question around, is it fair to ask, especially if you come from an authentic place, especially if you're coming from hey, I'm committed to working in this company and I want to be successful in my job and I want to grow in my position, and I thought this conference was something that would actually help me develop my skills. It sounds like from your perspective it's not. Help me understand what you're thinking, why you're thinking this wouldn't be the appropriate topic, and if no this time, what might solicit a yes next time? What conference might be more relevant? What topics do you think I do need to pay attention to grow in my career? So use it as a fodder from a place of curiosity, and to sort of to share why it's important for you to have this opportunity to begin with. So if you're coming from a place of authenticity and curiosity and support, then absolutely it's a natural place. If it's coming from a place of shaming someone or getting them in trouble or what have you, then obviously that wouldn't be the one to enter into, which it
No,
doesn't.
it's the former.
Yeah,
Thank you.
not at all. Great point.
Great question. Okay.
I know we're close on time here, so anything else that comes in the chat field, sure. But I also want to put some resources that are interesting to check it. If you enjoy this type of learning on your own, Amy Cuddy's TED Talk video, Body Language Shapes Who You Are, is a really fun one to listen to, as well as she not only talks about the power pose, but a lot of the fake it till you make it component, how you psychologically get yourself into the headspace to say you're worthy of this. It's a great video to watch. And Margaret Neal, she is the Stanford professor that we were talking about. Her YouTube video, Negotiating, Get You What You Want, goes through some of those steps that we talked about. And she's got a lot of great snippets to look at also. There's a ton on the web. I just wanted to reference a couple that I found most powerful.
That's fantastic. And Erin sharing that she watched the Brene Brown Houston TED Talk and her Netflix special. I've caught a little bit of the Netflix special as well. They're excellent.
Great.
Thank you for recommending those. And Fran just kind of rounded out her thought that if you're working with somebody who's a really difficult negotiator, who they just don't provide a lot of information, and so maybe Erin speaks to her boss, but he doesn't really give a ton of information, it's a tough challenge for sure.
It is. It might be hard to find out why the no, but ask questions about what would solicit a yes. Like Erin, we didn't talk much, but if what you're saying is you want to evolve in your career and go to different conferences that are going to build some skills or do some education or some learning that are going to help you grow in your job, that's what you want. So try to find out what would solicit a yes. If I can't find out why that was a no, what would get you a yes? What would get you what you want? Which is to grow in your job. And that's taking the conversation a different way. Again, if we're working with the assumption your boss wants you to be successful in your job, hopefully that's a positive and realistic assumption, then it should be a positive conversation. What's going to get me what I want? That was that very, very, very first question around, why are you asking for this? Yeah. I'm asking for this because I want to advance in my career and be a successful contributor. How do I get to some type of a yes? I know we're at top of the hour here. Stacy, do you want to wrap us up here?
I will. Thank you so much. I think that's such a great, as with anything, communication is key, and having it be a two-way communication is really important. And we do that a lot in sales too. When we hear a no, we ask, well, what could we do next time that would get us to a yes? And it's actually really valuable from a product improvement perspective and working on our own messaging and what we need to express, because often it's things that we do have, we just may not have communicated it as well as we could have. So anyway, this has been really helpful. I've had people texting me and saying that they really enjoyed it. So thank you all for being here today. We have a walk and learn next week in conjunction, a partnership with a fitness app called Gixo, Gixo, and you can sign up on our site. It's a free exercise hour where I will be talking about different strategies to fit in everything from work and career and family all into that, neat package that we try to make it look like. So thanks so much, everybody. Please feel free to follow up with any questions, and we will send this as a recorded version so you can see Sarah's slide. That was a question that someone had, Sarah, making sure that they can get access to your slides. And thank you so much, Sarah. This was your first presentation with us, and I thought it was fantastic. I learned a ton, so thank you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye.